We're going to call the Board of Finance meeting to order. The agenda has already been distributed, and the first order of business is the approval of the minutes. I would like a motion for approval. It's been moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
The minutes have passed. We're now gonna ask Ms. Rogers to take us through the agenda.
Okay, thank you. So next on the agenda is the security transaction action listing, and this is for the period covering December 9th, 2024 through January 17th, 2025. And during this time period, we purchased our investments through the Maryland Local Government Investment Pool, and it was an amount of $250 million. And at the time of the deposit in the investment pool, the rate was 4.57. And then during the same time period, we had redemptions of $130 million in securities. And no calls during this period.
What maturity are you buying right now?
What?
Maturity.
Normally we're between 6 months to 6 months.
You're not beyond 6 months.
No.
So Fred, do you want maturities for purchases to be identified?
I think that would be useful, given
Sure.
what you and I were involved with last week.
Correct. Yeah, if you would. And I actually had the same question. I wondered what the maturity was. So I appreciate that. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the purchases and redemptions as of January 27th, 2025.
So moved.
It's been moved
Second.
and seconded. All in favor?
Oh, your microphone isn't on. Yeah.
Okay.
He was just letting us know that they couldn't hear her. Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Jeanette.
Okay, the next item is our swap portfolio. This is as of December 31st, 2024. Not a lot of movement in the fair market value, so we went from $8,350,000 to from $8,520,000. The interest rate for the 10-year Treasury in November was 4.18%, and in December it was 4.58%. So not much movement in the value of our portfolio during this time period.
Any questions? Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the approval of the underwriter for the citywide affordable housing TIF. And the Department of Finance is recommending the appointment of Stiefel Nicholas and Company to be the underwriter for the citywide affordable housing special obligation TIF Series 2025. In December of 2024, the Mayor and City Council of Baltimore approved the establishment of the Baltimore Citywide Affordable Housing TIF Financing District, along with an initial authorization of up to $65 million in TIF bonds. The city is expected to approve an additional bonding capacity that will bring us up to $150 million. The Department of Housing and Community Development and the Department of Finance are advancing efforts for the first series of bonds anticipated to be issued in the second half of 2025. While the total amount and the specific use of the proceeds have not been finalized, the first tranche, thank you. Excuse me, sorry. That was my phone. While the total amount and specific use of the proceeds are still being finalized, the first series will finance the rehabilitation of vacant properties and possibly some public infrastructure. Further details will be shared with the board once the bond offering document is prepared. So the city, we sent out RFPs to 3 underwriting firms. Stifel Financial Corporation, Mesero Financial Incorporated, and Piper Sandler. The lead bankers for Stifel, Mesero, and Piper have all served as lead underwriters on the city's past TIF bond issuance and performed very well. Stifel was co-underwriter for the Port Covington TIF as well as for the Harbor Point Series 2022. The lead banker for Mesero also worked on the Port Covington TIF, the East Baltimore Research Park TIF bonds, and most recently the Reservoir Square lease revenue bonds. Piper underwrote the series of 2016, 2019, and 2022 Harbor Point bonds and is currently the city's lead underwriter for the anticipated Perkins Somerset and Old Town neighborhoods TIF. So we receive responses for all three firms. Each firm showed experience of being capable of executing the transaction and demonstrated an understanding of the key credit issues. Here's a following summary of the key responses. The firm that's most experienced is Stifel, followed by Piper. The firm with the lowest quote is Mesero at 7.372 per bond. This fee does not include underwriters' legal counsel, followed by Stifel at $7.50. The lowest interest rate on the bonds was proposed by Mesero at 175 basis points over the benchmark MMD, and Stifel and Piper had 200 basis points. It should be noted that the underwriters do not commit to the interest rate they propose. All firms have extensive experience at the national level within Maryland and specifically in the city. Stifel ranks at the top as underwriter by volume, followed by Piper. Mesero have recently re-entered the public finance space and is currently handling several transactions in Maryland. Both Stifel and Piper bring lead bankers with over 25 years of industry experience. Stifel demonstrated strong performance on the Harbor Point and Port Covington bond issuance, excelling in crafting offering documents that effectively presented a compelling narrative for the projects and the bond structure. This approach generated significant investment interest, with Harbor Point being 5 times oversubscribed and Port Covington 20 times oversubscribed. As a result, the city benefited from highly favorable pricing in both issuances. As described above, going over the fees again, Mesero and Stifel offered the lowest price. Piper price was at $9.95 per bond. All three firms' first choice for underwriting counsel proposed a fee of $80,000, excluding the disclosure document, which will be prepared by the city's bond counsel, McGuire Woods. Mesero presented the most favorable pricing structure with 175 basis point over the MMD, and as discussed earlier, Piper and Stifel had 200 basis point as their spreads. The underwriters do not commit to the interest rate they estimated. The actual interest rate will depend on our ability to effectively communicate the credit strength to investors and prevailing market conditions. Considering the factors in these proposals, our recommendation, including the recommendation of the city's financial advisor for the TIF MuniCap, is to select Stifel as the underwriter for the citywide affordable housing TIF. While all three firms are highly qualified, Stifel overall rating, including experience and fees, is the highest. We are confident Stifel will help us structure the bonds in the manner most advantageous to the city, provide appropriate disclosure to the bond buyers and the market bonds, and to market the bonds to obtain the best possible interest rate for the city. And so our recommendation is Stifel.
I have some structural questions. I may be a little confused, but I think the last time we called it vacant housing bonds. Am I correct on that?
Initially, when we started crafting
That doesn't matter,
the
but it's the
projects,
same
but
thing.
it was
The
called
same
vacant,
thing.
yes.
My memory is the credit that was presented was that these bonds would only be drawn upon when the houses were completed. And to do that, and you have it as to be used for infrastructure and to acquire the sites.
Right, so this first tranche of the bonds will be supported by existing properties that are included and that already have established increments. So once we issue the bonds, they will be used to do the development of the vacant property as well as some public infrastructure.
But-
So we will already have an established increment for the first
Okay, but the
tranche.
point of it is that because we don't have another deep pocket on the hook, is that there was to be a credit established before the bonds were drawn, correct?
No, we already have the increment in place for the bonds. So there's already,
They've already identified properties that are
Okay,
collateral for the
all
bond.
right, so the credit is existing before the bonds will be drawn upon, is the point.
yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what's unique about this one, where we're starting with an established increment. And right now, we're still doing analysis of what the increment will be to determine how large the first tranche of bonds will be.
Okay, but the point of it is that money is not going to be available until those houses are either rented or sold.
I can clarify a little bit. The TIF district includes houses that are currently vacant and houses that were vacant as recently as calendar year 2023 and 2024. Some of the houses that were vacant in 2023 have already been rehabbed and have gone on the market and have a new assessment and are basically generating tax revenue as of today. We are calling those properties that are already generating tax increment tranche 0, and the increment from those properties
Is sufficient to cover what will be drawn by the bonds.
exactly, essentially by definition, because we will only issue a tranche 1 that is supported by
I
tranche
just wanted to
0.
confirm, all right.
And then we will, down the road, consider a tranche 2 that is supported by the increment from tranche 1, once those houses are
I think
built.
the structure makes sense. I think the implementation, as described, is going to be very complicated.
I would just say the tranche 0 properties, a good number of them are already done, and that's sort of the advantage here, is that we're able with a district that's non-contiguous, that's really just going all around the city to where the vacants are. It picks up enough houses to do a tranche. So we don't have to do anything that hasn't already happened,
Now,
essentially.
you're going to have a lot of houses to be done, correct?
As many as the first tranche can support.
How many in total, for example, I recall?
We're still working to size the tranche.
Give me a round number,
A few hundred.
a few hundred.
Mhm.
Will these require building permits?
Generally, yes. I mean, they will, the houses and some of it can also be lots are in different states that, of disrepair that require different work. But
Okay, well, the
generally, yes.
reason I asked the question is because of the group that wants to lower property taxes. I've spent a lot of time with developers, and the one thing that they say is the very, very difficulty and the time that it takes to get a building permit. And we need to think about doing something to streamline that process, get more people involved. But the stories that I've heard that came in with people that talked to me were very, very particularized and graphic. So it's in this context, if you have a few hundred more that need to be permitted, I think this problem really needs to be addressed. That's the point I'm making.
I couldn't agree more. I'm happy to say that our colleagues at the Department of Housing are putting a lot of thought and resources into improving the permitting process. I also want to make a plug here, both for board members and just for the public. There is some great work happening right now with the governor's Vacancy Reinvestment Council. And that council is actually looking for external people to potentially share their ideas or assist with a number of subcommittees. One of those subcommittees is actually focused specifically on the pipeline and even more specifically on building permits. And actually, another subcommittee that I was going to speak to all of you later is focused on financing and fundraising.
Well, my purpose was not to be critical,
Sure.
but to flag a problem, because I think we all agree that the implementation was the sticking point in terms of this very good project.
Absolutely. And I want to recognize the validity of that. That is a real struggle we've had in the past. But I also, just for sake of the public, just want to highlight that this is something that has gotten better. This is the reason that we are now in this place where we have thousands of properties that have come online in just the last 2 years that are able to support the wave of the next few hundred is because it's become a faster process in the last couple of years. And so there's a lot more work to be done, but it definitely
I'm not
has.
being critical, trying to be helpful.
Absolutely. No, and I agree, and I appreciate it.
Just.
The obligor, Janelle, help me out, my memory might be faulty. Isn't the obligor department of Baltimore City Department of Housing and Development?
Who is the obligor?
On the bonds? Who is the obligor on the bonds? Who is the obligor on the bonds?
As far as making sure that we pay the bond payments, the debt service? Yes, so it's the increment from
The
the,
revenue
Oh,
bond.
yes.
it's the increment from the first, from the first tranche, the zero
Yeah.
tranche.
It's the city.
Okay, yes.
City is on the bonds.
Yeah,
But the revenue
Terrific
bonds-
buying opportunity.
Yeah, but the revenue bonds. They're not paid, they're not full in faith and
I
credit.
don't think they are revenue
They're
bonds.
not full faith and, they're not
no,
obligations.
no, they're
of this.
not.
They're not
They're
obligated.
revenue bonds.
Okay.
They're being supported by the increment from the
The only
assessment.
thing that's available for the credit is the increment.
It's the increment, okay.
That's correct.
That's fine. City's still on the paper.
And the thing that's different about this is we don't have a deep pocket developer. Well, I think they call that special taxes. We don't have the opportunity for special taxes as we did at Covington and other projects. That's the wrinkle that makes it more complicated.
But then the city is obligated to pay the special taxes.
No,
No.
only a develop, the
Are
way
you
it works
sure?
is the developer is the deep pocket in case the increment doesn't work.
No, not on this, not on these bonds.
And we also have support from council
Yeah,
that I don't know if everyone heard a comment.
that the city's the
No.
obligor.
Where are we?
Yes, Mr. Controller.
Well, it doesn't list a specific interest rate here other than to say, which one is lower than whose, and that in all cases, the underwriters do not commit to the interest rate they propose. So I'm not sure there's any real point to it. But is it fair to assume that the interest rate on this would be higher than the interest rate on a standard TIF because there is no special taxing district to guarantee payment of the bonds?
I would say the risk, it would be because there is,
Yeah.
there's no
These are
backup.
These
Right,
are slightly riskier than a regular TIF.
Yes.
But
Because
they
there's
are.
no
and-
special tax
Right, which is,
attached to it.
and the regular TIF is already slightly riskier than one of our full faith and credit bonds.
That's
Significantly.
correct in general, but there's a few things here that I think kind of add to the complexity on the positive side, along with on the risk side. In a normal TIF, you don't have much there on the ground when you're starting out in the sort of area that you're building it. You basically have to wait for a lot of things to happen on the ground to start generating increment before the TIF can come in. The TIF is usually the last piece of financing that comes in. And so it's certainly true for the TIFs that Baltimore City has done before, that there would be a developer sort of attached to it, one single developer that can be on the hook. There's still a risk there of the developer simply going out of business. And what makes this TIF different is you're spreading the support rather than having it on one developer to thousands of properties that have already been rehabbed, that are already generating tax increment. So the scenario where the assessments on that many properties would fall across the city, spread geographically, would fall by enough to fall below the coverage ratio that we do for TIFs, the 1.25. That extreme of a scenario, a 25% decline in assessments across the board, starts to look like the kind of scenario where if you had a developer, they would have been at risk of bankruptcy anyway. So I think there's genuinely an argument to be made here that because we are structuring this TIF with this tranche zero of existing revenue that's already there, which we don't do for typical TIFs, that it's not necessarily riskier than a traditional TIF. It's just the risk is differently set up.
I hear what you're saying, and while it is not in my interest to disagree with you, I was simply speculating that the market may not accept that explanation at face value, and I'm not like and really we've probably already taken up more time on this than it deserved. Okay. I was just saying more in response to Robert's original point that we should be prepared for the likelihood that the interest rate we pay on these be a little higher than what we're used to paying, somewhat magnified by the new overall interest rate environment itself.
Absolutely, and I just wanted to make one quick final point on that. We got some good information from Unicap on what kind of rate scenarios we might be looking at. Baltimore has not in the past done this kind of TIF, but many, many other places around the country have done TIFs that are what I think it's called in the industry like a naked TIF, where you don't have a developer backstop. You kind of just move forward. Now, the interesting thing is that kind of a TIF is absolutely objectively riskier than what we're doing, because all of those were not the non-contiguous kind that we're doing with properties already backing them. They truly were just not backed by anything. And those kinds of TIFs, the ones that you kind of just move forward without any special backing, were on average seeing about 1% interest rate higher than general obligations in the same jurisdictions. So yes, Mr. Comptroller, thank you for your point. I definitely agree, and we definitely have to kind of keep that in mind in the financing.
But if the developer goes bankrupt, you've still got the real estate to foreclose on, do you not?
Assuming there's anything actually there, because again, you sort of normally
I'm going to drop the point.
Sure.
Which is
going back and
which
forth.
is good that the point is being dropped, because the whole key to the question was really about the spreads.
Yes.
And as far as the rates are going to be market driven, and it's going to be also based on timing. But we're coming right back to why staff was recommending Stiefel, because of how they believe they will market this type of TIF, which I also think is a pretty important point. Are there other questions? It's not as much of a question, but the notes are silent on the recommendation that came from the Board of Finance at the 150,000 level. And that's how the city council was being approached. When it came back from the city council at the $65,000 level, there was a rationale, and I just think it's important for the Board of Finance to just hear the recommendation. And again, the recommendation wasn't not about whether the 150 was correct. It was about the approval that the city council was ready to offer. They were not ready to offer it at 150, but they were comfortable at the $65,000 level. Any background on that?
That's,
So, yeah, so basically the city council, they wanted to have some comfort in the issuance and not give us the whole 150, but to show that that moving forward as we issue the bonds, that the city can actually support paying the debt service. So instead of giving us the whole amount of the capacity, we have to come back and prove the progress of the project before we can.
that's right. I would go so far as to say that the city council was looking for a level of comfort on par with what the Board of Finance enjoys, and that as we roll out tranches, every tranche has to come through here with a full analysis, and the council was interested in getting that level of detail as well. So what we ultimately agreed on is that an amount that's sufficient for probably the first couple of tranches is what we would start on, but then there would be, along with coming back to the board, coming to the council as well with the same kind of information to show performance and update the plan.
Are there other questions? Hearing none, I would like to entertain a motion for the appointment of the underwriter selected.
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstention? Hearing none, that motion passed.
No other business,
Okay.
except that the next meeting will be February 24th.
Since there's no other business to come before us, I'd like to entertain a motion in second for adjournment.
So moved.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. This meeting is now concluded.
Motion to adjourn is always in order.